In 1974, a group of farmers digging a well in Shaanxi Province, China, hit clay and hit it hard. What came up out of that ground was the edge of an army that had been standing at attention in total darkness for over 2,000 years. Soil samples taken from that same ground decades later would reveal something far more dangerous than old pottery. Mercury. Not trace amounts, concentrations hundreds of times higher than anything found in nature, sitting exactly where ancient texts said a poisoned river was built to flow forever, in a chamber at the center of that mound that no living person has ever entered. That is only the beginning of what is buried under the dirt of this planet. Some tombs were built to honor the dead. Others were built to make sure the truth never got out, sealed with poison, booby traps, and bodies that were never supposed to be found by anyone. Join us, and let's discover the ancient tombs still hiding secrets more dangerous than death itself. Let's go. 270 nanograms per cubic meter. That is the kind of mercury reading scientists have picked up drifting off the burial mound of China's first emperor, a number that should not exist above ordinary soil anywhere on Earth. Ancient historian Sima Qian wrote 2,000 years ago that the emperor's tomb contained rivers and lakes of liquid mercury built to mimic the real geography of his empire, a silver world flowing endlessly under the ground. For centuries, that sounded like myth stacked on top of myth. Then LIDAR systems and soil probes started finding the same elevated readings in the same locations his account described. Qin Shi Huang did not simply want to be buried, he wanted to rule forever. So he ordered roughly 700,000 laborers to build him an entire underground empire, complete with a miniature version of the world above. Palaces studded with jewels, automatic crossbows engineered to fire on anyone who broke in. And at the exact center of it, past every trap and every layer of sealed earth, sits a chamber that has never once been opened in over 2,000 years. Not by archaeologists, not by looters, not by anyone. Nobody knows exactly what is waiting behind that final wall, only that the emperor built his entire kingdom underground to make absolutely certain nobody would ever get close enough to find out. Chinese officials have kept drone flights banned over the entire site for years, and every scan of the ground still requires clearance from the highest levels of government.
Topic number 12. Chachapoya Cliffside Tombs. In 1928, a 7-foot-tall clay figure came crashing down a cliff face in northern Peru, shattered on impact and split open to reveal a mummified body wrapped inside it like a shell. That figure was a Purun Machu, a sarcophagus built by the Chachapoya, a civilization the Inca themselves feared enough to call them the Cloud Warriors. These sarcophagi were built directly into sheer rock faces hundreds of feet above the valley floor, painted with faces, dressed in feathered tunics, and positioned to stand permanent watch over the settlements below, close enough to the living that entire villages lived out their lives under the gaze of the dead. In 1996, farmers stumbled onto something even larger. 6 stone funerary towers perched on a ledge above a remote cloud forest lake containing over 200 mummies stacked inside chambers that had gone completely untouched for 500 years. The bodies were bundled, positioned with their belongings, and sealed into rock ledges so difficult to reach that researchers still have to use ropes and climbing gear just to access them. One historian estimates that as much as 90% of the Chachapoya's cliffside burial sites remain completely unexplored, meaning the cliffs of northern Peru are almost certainly still hiding hundreds more bodies nobody has ever seen, watching over valleys that forgot their names centuries ago. Researchers estimate the majority of these tombs have never been photographed, cataloged, or even reached, sitting exactly where they were sealed while the rest of the world moved on without them.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this. The Nazca trophy skulls. A hole drilled straight through the center of a human forehead, with rope still threaded through it. is not something archaeologists expected to find scattered across an entire ancient cemetery in southern Peru. But that is exactly what turned up buried alongside the mummies of the Nazca, the same civilization responsible for carving the massive geoglyphs into the desert floor that still baffle researchers from above. Over 100 of these severed heads have been recovered since the early 20th century, each one deliberately removed from the body using a sharp obsidian blade, the base of the skull broken away, the soft tissue scraped out, and a hole punched through the front so the head could be carried on a cord like a grim piece of jewelry. Pottery from the period depicts these heads mounted on poles, hung from banners, and carried into ceremonies by warriors, suggesting they were not battlefield trophies collected in secret, but objects put deliberately on display. Genetic analysis on a number of the recovered skulls found something that unsettled researchers even further. Many of the victims came from the same communities as the people who took their heads, meaning the Nazca were not always harvesting the skulls of distant enemies. In some cases, they were taking them from their own. Researchers still cannot fully explain why a culture would ritually decapitate its own people and display the results for generations. And every new skull recovered from that desert only deepens the question instead of settling it.
Topic number 10. The Lost Tomb of Genghis Khan. Nobody knows where Genghis Khan is buried, and that is not an accident of history. It was the plan. When the founder of the largest contiguous land empire in human history died in 1227, his followers carried out one of the most successful concealment operations ever recorded. Legend holds that the funeral procession killed everyone it encountered along the route to keep the destination secret, then executed the soldiers who dug the grave, then executed the soldiers who executed those soldiers. Whether every detail of that account is literal history or amplified legend, one fact is undisputed. No one has ever found the tomb. Mongolian tradition holds it should never be found, and searches using satellite imagery, drone surveys, and ground teams scanning the steppes of Mongolia have turned up nothing conclusive across decades of attempts. Some accounts describe a river being diverted to run directly over the burial site once it was sealed, erasing any trace it ever existed. Every few years, another expedition announces a promising lead, a satellite anomaly, a soil signature, a local legend pointing to a specific hillside. And every single one of those leads has gone cold within months, leaving the richest unclaimed grave on the planet exactly as hidden as it was 800 years ago. Somewhere under the grasslands of Mongolia, the man who reshaped the map of the entire world is still waiting to be found by someone who never comes.
The sunken city of Herakleion. An entire Egyptian city dropped into the sea in a single catastrophic afternoon, and it stayed lost at the bottom of the Mediterranean for over 1,000 years before anyone found it again. Herakleion was once a major port near the mouth of the Nile, a place where pharaohs were crowned and massive temples stood in honor of the god Amun, until a combination of rising sea levels, soil liquefaction, and sudden ground collapse pulled the entire settlement under the waves without warning. It vanished so completely that historians spent centuries debating whether it had ever existed at all outside of a handful of ancient inscriptions. Then, in the year 2000, underwater archaeologist Franck Godiot located the ruins beneath the seabed near Alexandria, and what came up from the silt stopped the field cold. Colossal statues over 16 feet tall, gold coins, a temple complex frozen in the exact moment it went under, with human skeletons still positioned exactly where they fell when the ground gave way beneath them. Divers are still recovering artifacts from Herakleion today, and researchers estimate only a fraction of the city has been mapped so far, meaning entire streets and shipwrecks are still sitting untouched under layers of Mediterranean silt right now. Every dive season pulls up something new, and nobody diving those waters today can say with certainty how much of the original city is still waiting down there.
Topic number 8. Rosalia Lombardo's mummy. She died in 1920 at the age of 2, and if you look at her today, You would swear she is only sleeping. Rosalia Lombardo's body lies inside the Capuchin catacombs of Palermo, Sicily, and unlike the thousands of skeletal remains surrounding her, she still has skin, hair, and eyelashes that look soft to the touch more than a century after her death. Her father, devastated by her loss to pneumonia, sought out embalmer Alfredo Salafia and asked him to preserve her using a formula so effective that his exact chemical mixture was lost for decades afterward, becoming a genuine forensic mystery. Researchers eventually pieced together fragments of Salafia's personal papers and recovered notes describing a combination of formalin, zinc salts, alcohol, salicylic acid, and glycerin, a formula so precisely balanced it essentially mummified her at the cellular level while keeping her tissue lifelike instead of desiccated. She is often called the most beautiful mummy in the world, and visitors who see her in person frequently describe an unsettling sensation that she might open her eyes. In recent years, conservators noticed her eyelids shifting slightly under changing light conditions inside the crypt, a phenomenon eventually explained by environmental factors rather than anything supernatural, though that explanation has done very little to make the sight of her any less disturbing to the people who see it up close.
Topic number 7. The bent pyramid. An entire pyramid changes its angle halfway up its own body, and the ancient builders who caused that mistake never bothered to hide it. The bent pyramid of Dashur was Pharaoh Sneferu's first major attempt at a true smooth-sided pyramid, and for its lower half it rises at a steep, confident 45-degree angle before abruptly shifting to a much shallower incline partway up, giving the entire structure its strange bent silhouette visible from miles away. Engineers now believe the original angle put dangerous structural stress on the pyramid's foundation and internal chambers, forcing Sneferu's architects to change the design mid-build rather than risk total collapse on top of the workers still inside it. This is where the danger buried in these tombs stops being ancient history and starts becoming something engineers are still actively managing today. Because the same structural failure that nearly destroyed this pyramid in antiquity is exactly why its interior stayed sealed to the public for over 50 years. In 2019, Egyptian authorities finally opened the bent pyramid's inner chambers, revealing wooden beams still holding weight after 4,500 years, some of the oldest wood ever recovered intact from any ancient structure on the planet, sitting inside a monument that nearly failed the moment it was built and somehow outlasted almost everything constructed after it.
Topic number 6. Menkaure's lost sarcophagus. Somewhere on the floor of the Mediterranean Sea sits a 4,000-year-old coffin carved for an Egyptian pharaoh, and nobody has been able to find it for nearly 200 years. In 1837, explorer Howard Weiss forced his way into the burial chamber of the Pyramid of Menkaure at Giza and uncovered a massive basalt sarcophagus that no human eyes had seen since the pharaoh himself was sealed inside it. He had it hauled out through narrow ancient passages using rollers and raw manpower, shipped down to Alexandria, and loaded onto a merchant vessel called the Beatrice, bound for the British Museum in London. The Beatrice never arrived. In October of 1838, the ship sank in a storm somewhere in the Mediterranean, and to this day nobody knows exactly where, with survivors giving conflicting accounts that place the wreck anywhere from the waters off Gibraltar to the coast near Cartagena to the waters off Tuscany. Search teams have made multiple attempts to locate the Beatrice using sonar and dive expeditions, finding other wrecks along the way, but never confirming the one that matters. Basalt does not corrode quickly in seawater, meaning there is a real chance this pharaoh's coffin is still sitting fully intact on the seafloor right now, waiting for someone to search the one stretch of water out of thousands that actually holds it. No serious expedition has ever confirmed locating the actual hull, and the Mediterranean has had nearly 200 years to bury the evidence deeper.
Topic number 5.
Tomb of Cyrus the Great. A golden coffin vanished from inside one of the most heavily guarded royal tombs in the ancient world, and the man who found it missing was Alexander the Great himself. According to the historian Arrian, when Alexander reached Pasargadae in 324 BC and entered the tomb of Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Persian Empire, he found it broken into and stripped bare. The golden coffin that once held Cyrus's body was gone, along with the furnishings described by earlier visitors, the divan with legs of hammered gold, thick colored coverings, a Babylonian rug, all of it vanished without a trace. An inscription carved into the tomb carried a direct message from Cyrus to whoever eventually found him, asking that his bones be left undisturbed. Someone read that message and robbed him anyway. Alexander was reportedly so disturbed by the desecration of a ruler he deeply admired that he ordered the tomb restored and stationed guards to protect what remained of it. The tomb still stands today near Shiraz, Iran, one of the oldest surviving royal tombs on Earth. And to this day, no historical record explains exactly who broke the seal first, when it happened, or where everything they carried out of it ultimately ended up. The tomb itself has survived nearly intact for 2,500 years. Everything that once made it a king's resting place has not.
Topic number 4. The search for Cleopatra's tomb. Nobody has ever found the body of the most famous woman in ancient history, and archaeologists are closing in on the site right now. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, died in 30 BC, reportedly by her own hand, and ancient sources claim she was buried alongside Mark Antony in a tomb near Alexandria that has never been located. For years, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez has focused her search on Taposiris Magna, a temple complex west of Alexandria, uncovering coins bearing Cleopatra's image, a mask believed to belong to Mark Antony, and a network of tunnels running underneath the site that stretch for over a mile. One of those tunnels runs partially underwater, flooded by the shifting Mediterranean coastline over the past 2,000 years, forcing divers to navigate submerged, unstable passageways just to map where it leads. No royal burial has been confirmed yet, but Egyptian authorities have granted extended permits for continued excavation precisely because every new find keeps pointing deeper into the same unexplored section of tunnel. And if that passage ever opens into an intact chamber, it would instantly become one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in modern history, the final resting place of a ruler whose death marked the end of ancient Egypt itself, sitting somewhere underground that keeps shifting further beneath the waves with every passing year.
Topic number 3. The Screaming Mummy. His mouth is frozen wide open in what looks like a final, silent scream, and that expression is the reason Egyptologists still refer to him only as Unknown Man E. Discovered in the Deir el-Bahari royal cache in Egypt, this mummy was denied the standard embalming process given to nobility, wrapped instead in a rough sheepskin, a material considered ritually unclean in ancient Egyptian religious tradition and specifically associated with denying someone a peaceful afterlife. His organs were never removed. His body was never treated with the usual preservatives. Whatever killed him did it violently enough, and his burial team hated him enough that no one bothered to grant him the rites that would let his soul rest. One leading theory identifies him as Pentawere, a son of Ramesses III, implicated in a palace conspiracy to assassinate his own father. CT scans and DNA analysis conducted on the mummy support the theory that he died by strangulation or poisoning, consistent with an execution rather than a natural death. He was buried with contempt, wrapped like an animal, positioned to suffer in the afterlife the same way he made others suffer in life, and museum visitors who see his face in person today still describe the same instinct, an urge to look away, because a scream frozen in solid bone reads less like a corpse and more like a warning meant for whoever finds him next.
Topic number 2. Valley of the King's Booby Traps. A false floor built specifically to drop an intruder to their death waited undisturbed for thousands of years inside the Valley of the Kings, and modern surveys suggest there are more of them nobody has found yet. Grave robbers targeted this valley almost as soon as the pharaohs were sealed inside it, and Egyptian architects engineered elaborate countermeasures directly into the tomb designs to stop them. False doors leading to dead ends, deep shafts cut straight down into the rock, disguised as passageways, built specifically so an intruder moving in the dark would step forward confidently and fall to their death. Hidden chambers sealed behind false walls made to look like solid bedrock, and pits designed to catch flash floods, filling potential robbery tunnels with water and debris during rare desert storms. When Howard Carter's team finally broke into Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, after a series of unexplained deaths struck people connected to the excavation, they still found it had been broken into and resealed by robbers in antiquity, though most of the burial treasure remarkably survived intact. Ground-penetrating radar surveys across the valley continue to flag unexplained voids beneath tombs already considered fully mapped, meaning some of these traps, engineered by people who understood exactly what kind of greed would come looking for their king, may still be sitting there today, primed and completely untouched.
Well over 100 metric tons of liquid mercury may be sitting right now inside the one chamber on Earth that nobody has ever been able to open. And the man who sealed it in did it on purpose, knowing exactly what it would do to anyone who tried to get in. This is the chamber Sima Qian described in detail 2 centuries after the emperor's death. A room built beneath a scale model of his entire empire, with rivers of liquid mercury flowing through a miniature landscape. A ceiling inlaid with pearls representing the stars, and crossbow traps rigged to fire on intruders automatically. For generations, historians treated this as pure legend, until soil sampling and laser-based air surveys confirmed mercury concentrations exactly where Sima Qian said the rivers should be, hundreds of times higher than anything found naturally in the region, with vapor still leaking out of the ground into the air above the mound today. Researchers calculate the escaped vapor detected so far represents only a small fraction of what remains trapped inside, meaning the chamber has had 2,000 years to build a concentration of toxic gas capable of killing anyone nearby within minutes of exposure. When archaeologists opened a smaller pit connected to this site in the 1980s, painted colors on the clay figures inside peeled away and vanished within seconds of contact with open air. Colors that had survived intact for 2,000 years destroyed the moment modern light reached them. If a small side pit did that in seconds, nobody can predict what breaking the seal on the central chamber would release or destroy in the same instant, which is exactly why that door has never once been opened.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.